Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and we are continuing the season preview series today. So we take a look. Actually, let me re-say that. Welcome to the NHL, the Seattle Kraken. So this one's going to be a little bit different because we can't go off of their top point producers last season. We can't go off of their subtractions because they didn't really lose anybody. They didn't play last year, so we're going to look at the lineup, look at some of the guys they added in free agency, and we're going to kind of go from there. So this one might be a little bit shorter, which some of you are probably just fine with that. So looking at the lineup for the Seattle Kraken. So some of the guys that they added via free agency, whatever. Let's get to them. So Jaden Schwartz comes in. Alex Wennberg and Philip Grubauer were the three big names that came in through free agency to the Seattle Kraken. Now, I think there's obviously a need for a center, a potential top six center in the league that could come into Seattle, and not many teams were giving them up in the expansion draft. They're just too valuable. So they may see a situation here with Alex Wennberg where he may fit that role, and at points with the Florida Panthers last year, he was playing in the top six. So they're hoping that as a potential center in the top six, Seattle Kraken can maybe get that little bit of a spark out of Wennberg. Remember, he was drafted as a top six potential center to the Columbus Blue Jackets, so there is still that connection that he may become that. Again, is that what he's going to be? Is that what he is? Maybe, maybe not, but the Seattle Kraken's Ron Francis will give that a try. Jaden Schwartz, I think this was a risky one because of the amount of injuries Jaden Schwartz has had in his NHL career, especially recently with the St. Louis Blues. There's a reason the Blues didn't re-sign Schwartz. And I wonder if there is some concern. Yes, he does add goal scoring to your lineup, but they gave him a lot of term, and they gave him a lot of money per year. I do have my concerns about that contract. And Philip Grubauer, who I'm not going to complain about this one. I think this was a huge add for the Seattle Kraken. Kind of changed the dynamic in between the pipes, because the original plan was you have Drieger and Vitek Vanacek in between the pipes, and since then, they bring in Grubauer. Vanacek goes back to Washington, and there you go. Now you have another former Washington Capitals goaltender, Philip Grubauer, coming in. So win-win there for the Seattle Kraken. This guy is a difference maker, and the question is, was he a little bit sheltered in Washington and in Colorado? Because the times he's been in the NHL, he's been with really good teams that are potential Stanley Cup champion winners. That will not be the case potentially in Seattle this year. So he may be in a situation where maybe foreign environment. And he did go for the bag. I can't deny him for doing that. I think a lot of people out here would do that. But there is concern about maybe a potential drop in his play, at the very least in the first half of the season. So we'll see what happens there. With that said, let's look at the Seattle Kraken's potential starting lineup. So you got Jaden Schwartz, Yanni Gourde, and Jordan Eberle as your top line. I like that. That's a really good group up front. Not really much to complain about. I like Eberle and Schwartz. They could score goals. I do have questions about Yanni Gourde, though, in the top six. Is he a top six center, especially a first-line center? The assignments are going to be a lot more difficult for Yanni Gourde as a first-line center than a third-line center with the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's just a different dynamic. And looking at the second line, you got Kalle Järnkrok, Jared McCann, and Jonas Donskoi. I think that's actually a pretty solid line. Donskoi has had his struggles in Colorado, but I think it's still a good add. Jared McCann, they kind of got him nicely from the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're like, all right, you just traded for this guy, and we're just going to pluck him for you. Sorry. And then Kalle Järnkrok, he's been a good player in Nashville, kind of fallen off a little bit, and he doesn't bring that absolute scoring edge. And I think that is part of the concern with Järnkrok. He's not a consistent goal scorer, but he can add something to your lineup, which I think is, again, he's difficult to play against. I think Ron Francis and his group there, Dave Hackstall, all those guys want to bring guys that are not fun to play against. And when you start to look at the bottom six, you're going to see that on full display. Brandon Tanah from Pittsburgh, a really nice addition there. Again, not fun to play against. He scores big goals. Wennberg, I'm surprised they have him listed as the third-line center, but that's a nice add. So you could probably move him and Jared McCann between second and third-line center back and forth. Mason Appleton, He is a third-line center. You could argue a fourth-line center most of his career in Winnipeg or on the scratch pad. He just wasn't able to get that fair shake. He will get that now in Seattle. So I wonder how he's going to do, in that situation. And then you go to the fourth line. I think the fourth line is actually one of the better fourth lines in the league. You have Nathan Bastian and Colin Blackwell, as well as Morgan Geekie, who they picked up from the Carolina Hurricanes. Everybody was giving Ron Francis a lot of heat for not taking his former first-round pick, Jake Bean. But don't sleep on Morgan Geekie. This kid could be a real talented player, potential to be a top 6 center in the NHL. And this is a good way for him to develop. And Colin Blackwell, who had a great season with the New York Rangers last year and a lot of minutes, that's a guy that could be a nice mentor to a younger Geekie. And Nathan Bastian, who they picked up from New Jersey, he's 22, 23 years old, so he's still fairly young. He's going to add that young potential to the Kraken lineup. And he may even move up into that middle 6 part of the lineup by the end of the season if he's on good terms there with Dave Haxtell. So, interesting forward group to say the least. You look at their defense, Vince Dunn and Adam Larson is your top pair. I like Vince Dunn. I don't know if he's a top pairing defenseman, but maybe it works out with the Kraken. Mark Giordano and Jamie Alexiak, one of the biggest defensive pairs in the NHL. Giordano is right around 6 feet, and Jamie Alexiak was a 6'6", 230-something pounds. He's a big dude. A big dude. So we'll see how that works out. And then the third pairing, you got Carson, Soucy, and Hayden Flurry. I actually like this group. Carson Soucy coming over from Minnesota. I think he's a guy, he's just going to add that little bit of depth on the left side to their blue line. And I think he's just a guy that he had a good season in Minnesota. Again, maybe on a weaker team, but still that he does have some ability. And I think the potential that Ron Francis saw, it was just to the point he couldn't ignore. He really wanted him. And then Hayden Flurry comes in from Anaheim. I am so pissed that the Ducks just continue to lose these guys. They hemorrhaged Shea Theodore, and now they've given up Hayden Flurry in the last expansion draft. So that's a really good pickup, and I think a guy that, again, I think it could be to the point by the end of the season, Hayden Flurry could be on that top pair for this team. I just think he could be better than Adam Larson and Jamie Alexiak. So as long as he continues to develop, he has a good summer, a good training camp, watch out for Hayden Flurry in Seattle. And then goaltending, one of the better goaltending tandems in the league, Philip Grubauer and Chris Driedger. Really good tandem there for the Seattle Kraken, and I'm looking forward to seeing what that group does, because the dynamic, again, for Driedger has already changed from when he came in. He was projected to be the starting goaltender, that Marc-Andre Fleury-esque guy that steps in as your goalie. And that has quickly changed now that Philip Grubauer has come in. So has that changed the dynamic since Chris Driedger has signed that contract? So, yeah, we'll see what happens with that. You look at some of their depth. They don't really have a ton of depth. I mean, they've only held one draft, and they've only had a couple guys in the expansion draft that will be in the organization down in, Palm Springs. So you got guys like Cole Lind, Luke Henman, Morgan Geekie, Alex True, Connor Carrick, Cale Fleury, Antoine Bibeau, and Joey Decord. So that is your depth, everybody on the depth, and we'll start to see that develop as this team continues to grow and develop. With that said, the big question, first off, are they going to make the playoffs? Before we even get into the conversation of if they can compete with, Vegas's expectations back in 2018, can they make the playoffs first? And I think there is an argument to be made in that Pacific Division in particular that the Seattle Kraken can get into the playoffs. But like I said, you've got legitimately 3 teams that could already be in the way of that. The Vegas Golden Knights, Edmonton, and Vancouver. And there's 3 spots right there. Now you're hoping for one of those 2 wildcard spots, which you have teams like LA coming up, St. Louis on the West Coast, in the Central, Chicago. Like, those teams could be vying for those final spots in the wild card. So I think Seattle misses the playoffs this year. I don't think they will meet the expectations of the Vegas Golden Knights. It was a one-off thing, and I think the Seattle Kraken are going to exploit salary cap situations next summer. They realized that a lot of teams freed up a lot of money this year. They have a lot of buyouts and stuff like that. And because of the flat salary cap right now, we're going to see teams in a jam next summer. And I think the Seattle Kraken may just pounce on some of those teams next year to use their salary cap space as leverage. So, I don't think they make the playoffs this year, but optimistically, this team is set. Ron Francis knows what he's doing. He did this in Carolina when he brought them in from Hartford. And I think we're going to see something similar here with the Seattle Kraken. So, no playoffs this year, but a bright future ahead. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you think of the Seattle Kraken in year one? And in their inaugural season, will they go to the Stanley Cup playoffs and kind of mimic the Vegas Golden Knights' success? Let me know down below. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys next time.